Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 78 of the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Wright, coming to you from the beautiful and comfortable confines of Atlantic City, New Jersey. Wherever you may be watching or listening, I thank you as always. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel. You can check the show out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and as well on Substack. Hopping right into this episode 78, it's touching on some NBA news and notes that I wanted to touch on that I thought was near and dear. Some things that I caught over the past week or so. We know it's coming up on that time, end of September, middle to end of next month will be the start of the basketball season. Kind of funny because, full disclosure, most of us don't really start paying attention to basketball until Christmas. However, it's that time of year where, still got to start prepping and revving up for the season. Guys are revving up, teams are prepping, guys coming back from injury, guys still getting extensions. Teams kind of more or less fortifying their roster for the beginning of the season or preseason / regular season. But nonetheless, hopping into it, it's something that I want to hop into from the Athletic. Jamal Murray getting his extension. Now, I know that the Olympics don't more or less are not indicative of NBA basketball. I know that he got injured in the playoffs, and I know that his play has tailed off since. This to me seemed like a very, very desperate move. I mean, again, and shout out to Jamal Murray for also securing the deal with New Balance. Give him that too. He was 27 years old, entering in the final season of his deal. Kind of felt like this only made sense for the Nuggets on that part. And that was all coming off the 5-year deal that he had signed with Denver. He'll earn $36 million in the 2024-2025 season, which again is fantastic for him. But again, Jamal Murray has played very inconsistent for a year and a half. Now, we expect better health. He'll be all right, but I don't know if y'all paid attention. In the playoffs, he ain't look good. Now, after the Lakers round, against the Lakers, he looked great. Second round, he looked terrible. Olympics, he looked terrible. And I just felt like, okay, well, you kind of could have played this out. And said, we'll give it to the last year. We like you. We just want to see you prove it to us again. But I get it, with the injury history and the fact that he's also had to prove it before and he's helped his team win a championship. You want to take care of your guys. Completely understand. No one's going to bat an eye at it. Though I will be definitely keeping an eye on that because you've given him that type of extension when you know that you still don't have shooters on the outside. Interesting to see. Definitely keep an eye on that in Denver. But hopping further west to my team, Sacramento Kings, and the newly acquired shooting guard Demar Derozan. He spoke with athletes, opened up about mental health, which I think is always a dope thing, especially when you get athletes talking about mental health and talking about the issues that they necessarily battle with and how they want to try to help others, reach the goals and the peaks that they've reached by, finding more holistic and natural ways to deal with the mental strengths and mental issues and ailments that may bother some of us. He spoke about his book, Above the Noise, My Story of Chasing Calm. Like I said, I read some of the excerpts from the book. It's a pretty good book if y'all can check it out. It's definitely on Amazon, eBay, a couple of different places. I would definitely subscribe for you to check it out on Apple Books. Apple Books has a ton of books on there, a ton of good books right now. I definitely just downloaded The Art of War from there, reading a couple other books from there. But like I said, you can definitely find DeMar DeRozan's book on there as well. He's been publicly speaking about this subject since 2018. He spoke on losing his father and how fatherhood has affected him as well. I think it's always dope when you see athletes do things like this because it gives, people like myself, other people who maybe watch fans of the game or fans of the player, gives them that chance to reach out and understand that, yeah, they are human beings as well. They go through some of the same issues that we go through. Now I have somebody that maybe I could, attach myself or lynch myself to and prove and show that, I ultimately can do this and I can overcome what's been bothering me or what's ultimately been an issue. It's dope to see. It's great to see. And ultimately, DeMar DeRozan is going to have to continue to just fight that battle because it's going to be an everyday battle. It's going to be something that you're always going to have to overcome. Mental illness is not something that you overcome easily. It's not something that you overcome quickly. So shout out to him for at least speaking on it. It's not something that he could definitely fix right away. But the fact that he's been addressing it, speaking on it, harping on it, and making sure it's been attentive and been acknowledged. I just want to give him shout outs for DeMar DeRozan for that. And I'm expecting big things from him this year. I mean, make no mistake, this guy's been solid wherever he's been. He's been solid for the Spurs. He's been solid for the Raptors. He's been solid for a lot of teams. And ultimately, I just expect this guy to do what he's supposed to do and be solid for the Kings. And hoping for big things for him in Sacramento. Hoping for real big things for him. Next, we are going all the way down to NOLA, a.k.a. New Orleans. Fitting today, especially after my Eagles got that victory in New Orleans. Yeah, check that out on the live stream, too. My live reaction on that, guys. But Brandon Ingram, touching on that situation. What is going on with the Brandon Ingram situation? Brandon Ingram is still technically on a trading block, which I think is kind of weird. I think it's kind of crazy how that all still playing out, but he's still on a trading block. There's been no long-term extension guaranteed to him. And I thought what has also been key, something I read also in The Athletic, which I thought was dope. Ingram didn't show up to a voluntary minicamp that was held by Pelicans players in California. Now, keep in mind, this is something typically that the players have been holding now for a couple of years that they go to. And it's only the only players who didn't show up, ironically, were Brandon Ingram and Reggie Theus. Daniel Theus, excuse me, I said Reggie Theus. I'm thinking of the old Kings player. Kings on the brain. But Daniel Theus and Brandon Ingram are the only guys who didn't show up. Ingram not showing up is obviously the more perplexing one. Now, they also stated in the article that Zion left, but Zion also had a Jordan engagement to go to in China. So that's the only reason why he left early. So pretty much 98% participation as far as the Pelicans are concerned for their players only workouts in California. However, no Brandon Ingram. So the fact that he doesn't have a contract, trade didn't happen to Sacramento like he thought, trade didn't happen to a couple different places like he thought, he's kind of in limbo. And it's just a weird situation for the Pelicans because, again, the fact that they don't really have ownership that, I should say, for lack of better words, gives a fuck about the real direction of the team. They're going to have situations like this where you got good players just in limbo because they don't really know where they're going to go because the team doesn't want to get rid of you for nothing, but because they don't really know the value of trades or making the proper deal, you're just sitting in limbo. So, kind of fucked up for Brandon Ingram, but more or less something to just keep an eye on for Brandon Ingram and the New Orleans Pelicans to see how that whole situation plays out. Lonzo Ball, I thought this was definitely interesting too in The Athletic. Is Lonzo Ball ready to play? And I know y'all are probably thinking, like, why the hell are you even talking about Lonzo Ball? If y'all, for those of y'all who don't know or hadn't known, Lonzo Ball hadn't disappeared off the face of the earth as far as a basketball player because he was ass. Lonzo Ball had disappeared off the face of the earth as a basketball player because he had been dealing with severe injuries. He had been injured now for about, let's see, it's 2024. He was roughly injured now for about 2.5, almost 3 years. He's been working out starting in the spring. Kind of revamped the workups out. It started out, running, light jogging, 1-on-1, 2-on-2. Now thank God he's up to been doing 5-on-5 work against other NBA players. It's definitely great news for Lonzo Ball. He was making an impact before suffering that injury in the 2021-2022 season. Like I said, I thought it was 3 or 4 years. I was correct. It's been 3 years. And ironically, that last season he played, he shot 42.3% from 3 that year. It's interesting because I really feel like had he been healthy or had he been there most of the way, I don't think they would have struggled as much as mightily as they have with Levine, with Vucevic, with DeRozan, and with having Alex Caruso. Having those guys, I think having him there at the point would have helped them tremendously. Probably would have been able to navigate through some of them teams in the Eastern Conference a lot easier. Probably would have gotten to the playoffs instead of having to play in the play-in. But nonetheless, he just hasn't been healthy. It was a bad pick by the Lakers to pick him. De'Aaron Fox has outplayed him. Definitely been a better point guard. And I feel for Lonzo Ball because, dealing with the nutty shit with his daddy early on and dealing with the fact that your brothers are still coming into the league, still trying to find their own. You still trying to hone your skills and your game, your NBA body and your NBA mindset and everything. He just hasn't really been healthy, and it's just been very, very sad to see. Most guys you would think in this situation would be healthy, would be healthy enough, to play enough games. I mean, but 2 or 3 years. I'll be honest with you, with the injury that he suffered, with that knee injury, we kind of thought he wasn't going to ever be back. My brother's a diehard Bulls fan, and he thought, this guy's not going to be back, and if we get anything from him, it's a blessing. And I guess, understandably so. You can see that, but I must admit, I'm kind of a little optimistic and see how he's going to be and how he might respond and how he might show out. The question, though, is if he plays, do you keep LaVine and Vucevic? Because essentially the whole issue has been that without him being out there on the floor, you don't have a point. So it's easier to clog the lane against Vucevic. LaVine has just been bad health and, matchups. So essentially it's like, how does this play out? How will this play out? I personally think if they're smart, you still get rid of those guys because it's going to help you with the cap space. Keep Lonzo Ball just as backup insurance because you don't really know. You don't want to let this guy go and it's like, damn, we held on to him all that time. We let him get healthy, then we let him go. And then now he's actually a decent point guard again. You keep him as insurance, but you buy yourself time to grab another point guard and then grab another point guard in the draft or develop some of the young guys that you got and see what it works with because ultimately I don't feel he stays healthy enough to where you have to keep Vucevic and LaVine around, and that's going to make a huge difference in the Eastern Conference, especially in the Central Division for the Bulls. Because last time I checked, they still got Cleveland. And the fact that Cleveland's there, Indiana's there, it's going to be pretty hard for them. So, interesting times in Chicago, interesting times for Lonzo Ball. I'm glad to see him back. Hopefully he's able to get back and be healthy enough to play basketball again because it's a shame. It's a shame to see a guy suffer through this type of injury and suffer through this type of malaise and mental funk that you go through, wondering if you'll ever even play basketball again. So, shout out to Lonzo Ball. Hopefully he's able to recover and definitely get back out there. Speaking of point guards who've proven themselves, TJ McConnell, backup point guard for the Indiana Pacers. A couple weeks ago, he agreed to an extension, 4 years, $45 million. He's been a good, solid backup point guard for the Pacers. He's been one of those guys that's definitely been, holding it down for them. He averaged 10 points last year and shot 55% from the field and minus 18 minutes per game, which is hella impressive. He was one of the linchpins to help get this team to the Eastern Conference Finals. So definitely good to see Indiana make sure one of their guys got paid. No fucking around on that aspect. So it's definitely good to see there. TJ McConnell's not a world beater. He's not somebody that's going to light the world on fire. But as we've seen late in the regular season, as we've seen in the postseason, he's a guy that can give you points. And if he gets hot, it may be the game that you need to win a game 4 or a game 5 to add a game more in the series or possibly close out a series. So definitely shout out to TJ McConnell. Shout out to the Pacers for identifying one of their own and getting them paid. How that works out with the Miles Turner situation. Does Halliburton sign his contract extension to kind of take that, give the team some cap relief? They got a lot of cap questions. Like I said, I reported on the previous episode. They got a lot of cap questions going into next year and the following year. But again, more or less, shout out to TJ McConnell for making sure they got his money and playing well, and shout out to the Pacers for making sure they took care of one of their guys. And last but not least in this episode, I want to touch on something that was something I thought deep about while I was reading a couple of those articles in The Athletic. This one touches on what will the new look Clippers look like with Leonard and Harden leading the way. And I make sure I put that in air quotes because these guys are never fucking healthy. So leading the way essentially is like possibly playing 65 games. Okay. There's no PG-13, obviously. He's going to the Sixers, so we can't blame the mediocrity on him now. That's one piece of the mediocrity puzzle that's going. Westbrook has been traded to he was traded to Utah, was waived, eventually went to the Nuggets, so he's going as well. But what this does, and what this has done for the Clippers essentially, has freed up ballroom. Now there's room for another ball handler and playmaker. So gotta give them credit in that aspect. Instead of keeping on to what you got and it ain't really working, make moves, figure it out. You open it up in a new arena, you'll still be competitive enough. And on top of it, you could probably add some guys, in the offseason later or trade deadline or possibly the following year. So, as any new building does for any floundering, befuddling, crippled franchise, a stadium always brings new hope. Having said all that, though, There's still uncertainty with the lineup. I mean, obviously with their injuries and the guys that got left in the rotation. We know for a fact from what the coach, from what Tyronn Lewis said, from what the roster and general manager Lawrence Frank has kind of outlined. We know that Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, and Zubac are going to be the starters. Those three guys are definitely locked in. As y'all know, it's a roster of 5, those starting and on the bench. So a lot of work there for the Clippers to figure out who the other guys are going to be. They could possibly, from what I was seeing in the article, where they're saying there's a flirtation, there's an idea where they could possibly flirt with a 9-man lineup, having a Kawhi Leonard, a James Harden, Zubac, Jones, having Man, Powell, Batum, Dunn, and Mo Bamba, having all those guys in a different rotation, which I get it. Gives you some size, gives you some shooting, gives you some athleticism on the outside. So again, I get it on the wing. However, the pick and roll would have to be an option for these guys because without it, I don't really see how this works. James Harden barely plays basketball, and when he does play, he's serviceable in the regular season and then disappears in the postseason. And Kawhi Leonard, outside of his awkward, cringeworthy interviews, you don't know really if he's actually going to stay healthy enough to continuously play at a consistent level and win games. So, interesting to see what the Clippers do. I thought that article was something interesting to touch on, and definitely interested in it with the NBA season approaching. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode, guys. I thank you as always. Like I said, check the show out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on Substack. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Make sure you enjoy the rest of your Sunday games, rest of those late games coming up in the NFL docket. Again, fly Eagles fly. Take care and enjoy.